Tenochtitlan, a city that comes out of a dream, which is bigger than Constantinople and prettier than Venice. These were the words of one of the most notorious Spanish explorers when he first laid eyes on the capital of the Aztec Empire. No one from Europe or any other place in the world at the time was expecting this level of development and sheer size from the supposedly uninhabited New World. What Bernal saw that day would inspire him to write several letters and later a book in order to grasp and try to communicate what seemed to be unbelievable. And unfortunately, as we all know, those letters reached Europe, and the rest is history.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
The Aztecs were a nomad society who used to move around all over Central America, being attacked and repelled by other tribes, until one day they found a perfect location to settle. On what is now Mexican City, 700 years ago was a massive lake called Lake Texcoco, home to hundreds of tribes that lived off its resources all around its shores. According to legend, the Aztecs were guided by their gods to find and make their home the island of Tenochtitlan, located in the west and more shallow part of the lake, so they did. In the first few years, building materials were hard to find, seeing that people had to live off the island's supplies and had to trade in goods with mainland tribes in order to expand. But with the development of better vessels, and after the period of adaptation, the Aztecs began expanding to the next big island, just a few hundred meters north of Tenochtitlan. The expansion to this island, now known as Tlatelolco, allowed them to gather even more resources and opened up more unclaimed territory for the tribe. But there was still a problem. They remained surrounded by water, and their expansion seemed limited by the size of the islands they conquered. Or was it? You see, the Aztecs were much more advanced than just a nomad tribe who moved from place to place with no end in mind. The emperors at the time started extensive drainage and building projects such as temples, bridges, and whole neighborhoods, which allowed them to expand much quicker than normal and claim that area of the lake as their own, much like the Egyptians and their pyramids, which will be next week's video. Subscribe and drop a like if you don't want to miss it. Together with the neighboring tribes of Tlacopan and Tetzcoco, from which they traded and developed relationships with, they started conquering their biggest rival, the city of Azcapotzalco, which ruled a significant part of the lake. From then on, after being able to defeat the city, little by little they went on to take over the whole lake and their respective citizens, with the entirety of the lake belonging now to the Triple Alliance. Between the Aztec and the cities of Tlacopan and Tetzcoco, economic activity, expansion, and the number of building projects skyrocketed. The Aztecs started developing technology never before seen, like dams that separated fresh water coming from the rivers on the west from salt water from the ocean on the east, extremely long bridges which connected both cities to each other and the mainland, allowing for more rapid trade, movement of goods and people, and better defense from possible attacks, seeing that there were multiple passageways, some as big enough to allow for the movement of 10 horses side by side at the same time, according to Spanish reports centuries later. The expansion was going so smoothly that soon they started reaching the borders of both islands, and as seen nowadays with modern technology, they started reclaiming land from the lake and actually creating new land for future projects, so much so that this amazing expansion eventually led to the merger of both, becoming the biggest island on the lake. But the previously separated cities both sought to preserve their differences and emperors even after the merger. While Tenochtitlan was the largest and more populated city of the two, Tlatelolco was the center of trading and religious activities, having by far the biggest market and temple. It is estimated that at its peak, the Aztec capital city was among the largest cities in the world, with perhaps as many as 200,000 inhabitants, with the empire itself having an area of 8,000 square miles and a population of millions. It was a city of great wealth, obtained through the spoils of tributes from conquered regions. Perhaps the words of Hernan Cortez, in a letter written to the Spanish king, can give a better idea of the beauty of this city. I shall not be able to relate 100th part of what could be told respecting these matters, but I will endeavor to describe, in the best manner in my power, what I have myself seen. I am fully aware that the account will appear so wonderful as to be deemed scarcely worth of credit, since even we, who have seen these things with our own eyes, are yet so amazed as to be unable to comprehend their reality. Two aqueducts, adjacent to the bridges, supplied fresh water to the city from the springs on the west, intended mainly for cleaning and washing, seeing that the preferable drinking water would come from mountain springs. At the heart of the city was the sacred district, the religious and ceremonial center. This area was surrounded by a stone wall painted with serpents and could hold more than 8,000 people within its limits. 12 massive religious structures could be found in this area, such as a 60 meters tall Great Temple, painted blue, red and yellow, with each color being dedicated to a different god. There was also a ball court, priest's quarter, and schools for training young noblemen for priesthood. Adjacent to the sacred district, we could find the administration buildings and also luxurious palaces of the kings and nobles, with the most notorious building being the Montezuma II Palace, where Spanish reports describe the existence of beautiful gardens with aromatic herbs and fruit trees, aviaries with up to 10 rooms home to colorful and tropical birds, a zoo hosting hundreds of local exotic animals such as pumas, jaguars, snakes and foxes, and even an aquarium with 2 separate ponds to allocate both salt and freshwater fishes. Commoners lived at a distance though. They were organized into neighborhoods called calpulli with their own local temples and markets. Those populations included laborers and farmers, as well as craft specialists such as potters, weavers, sculptors and soldiers. The market in Tlatelolco is said to be twice as large as the square in the city of Salamanca, and more than 60,000 people gathered there daily to exchange goods. It was divided into sections such as food, jewelry, materials and art, and chocolate. They believed that chocolate was a gift from God, which I can understand why, and that drinking this chocolate would give them godlike wisdom. The Aztecs also placed a high emphasis on education, both at home from their parents and in schools from teachers. Their schools were divided by social class as well as gender. Noble children would go to specific schools to learn about astronomy, philosophy and history, whilst lower class children would be trained in warfare and skilled trade. Girls' education was instead focused on home caring duties. Although the Mexicas were master accountants, being the only civilization in Latin America to create some form of writing, much like the Egyptian hieroglyphs, they were also renowned for being bloodthirsty warriors, and for their penchant for mass human sacrifice. It is estimated that 20,000 people were sacrificed every year, with the rituals involving skinning, dismembering and decapitating people, as well as their most infamous practice of ripping a man's heart out while he was still alive. One unfortunate thing to note about these otherwise fascinating people was that they developed a kind of slavery, although different than the one used by the Europeans. In the Aztec Empire, slaves could in fact earn enough money to buy themselves freedom. Slavery was used as a kind of currency. Aztecs would sell themselves into slavery to pay off debts and would even sell their children for a predetermined number of years. As far as slavery goes, the Aztecs didn't have it quite as rough as some. They were allowed to marry, have children, earn some money and even own land. They were also lovers of sports and art, being their way of developing camaraderie and relationships between the soldiers and population in general. Just imagine being an explorer, traveling almost lost at sea, reaching a new land where you thought you had nothing but rocks and trees, and after months or even years of starvation and malnutrition, you laid eyes on such a beautiful city with unbelievable complexity and art. That must have felt amazing, much like stepping foot on the moon. I just wish that on a different timeline, all the ancient cultures and buildings still existed, and that people were still able to visit all the places destroyed by past civilizations. Drop a like if you want a video about other ancient civilizations, and thanks for watching it. Obrigado.